do you call a guy that hangs around with a bunch of musicians? A drummer. It's like, no, that's what I call a singer.
How about this one? What's the difference between a drummer and a drum machine? You only have to punch the information into a drum machine once.
How do you know there's a drummer knocking at your door? He tells you how much you have to pay for the pizza.
All right. Buddy Mike, I missed you, man. How you been? It's been a while.
So I was just getting mic'd up off camera. They put a mic on me, and we were discussing how giving a drummer a mic is a very
Never a good
dangerous
idea.
thing.
Never a good idea, yeah. Drummers aren't really meant to have microphones, and usually in the middle of the drum solo, I'll usually like want to say something to the crowd, but usually there's a lot of F-bombs, and you know, you just can't help it. You know? You get excited. You know?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of good singing drummers, though. Who are some of your favorite singing drummers?
I mean, definitely Don Henley from the Eagles. You know, he was definitely a big one. You know, he was kind of, you know, it was cool to see a drummer that could actually sing, you know, and actually write and be like a lead singer. Him and you know, Levon Helms from the band. You know, he did it.
Phil Collins?
Phil Collins, of course. Yeah.
Well, to me, the early guys were the guys in the bands that sang. You had like Ringo. Ringo would always have a song on a Beatles album, or
you'd have to take the mic, put it like between his legs, because they didn't have boom stands back then. That was cool.
Well, actually, the best singing drummer in terms of mic placement, Andy Sturmer from Jellyfish. You ever see Jellyfish?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. His kit is like this. Is basically
he
like
just
a
stands
cocktail.
up, right?
And he front of the stage, standing, playing drums while standing and singing.
Yeah,
and then Peter Criss was one of my.
He did some singing. He
did a lot of singing. Like he sang Black Diamond and Hard Luck Woman, and Kiss's biggest hit was him. Was Beth.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah.
I mean, to me, those are my drum heroes. Are the drummers that are more than just drummers. One of the first things when I first met you, the thing that blew me away, the thing that immediately caught my eye and blew me away was your performance. I mean, you are a performer. I remember first time I met you, we did Uproar together.
Yeah, we did the whole tour.
Summer of 2010. And I remember it was the first show, and my drum tech came into the events dressing room. He's like, dude, have you seen the drummer from Halestorm, man? He's insane, man. You got to see him. And I hadn't seen you play before. I knew about the band, but I hadn't seen you play yet. So I went out, I watched you, and I was blown away by the performance, the stick twirling, the acrobatics, and never missing a beat.
Oh shit!
First of all, where's that come from? Like, who were some of your type of drummers like that kind of got you into that kind of performance?
Yeah, I mean, like drummers like John Bonham and Keith Moon and Ginger Baker, like all these guys were just like there was so much energy where they're playing, and I really wanted to do that. Carmine Appice from Vanilla Fudge.
None of those guys do play like you play, except for Keith. Keith.
Oh yeah, Keith. Yeah.
Keith was the first time I saw Keith. He was one of the main reasons I played drums, because you couldn't take your eyes off of him. He was like a front man behind the drums, and I definitely could see that in you for sure.
I think both Keith and I were probably attention whores growing up,
yeah.
So we. But I mean, it kind of started, the whole tricks and theatrics kind of just started from when we started out as a band. We wanted to just, you know, stand out and do something different and put out a lot of energy and put a lot of ourselves into it, because we loved playing so much, you know. And we would go on tour with bands with like crazy light shows and pyro, and so all of us were like, well, we can't afford that, so I guess we just have to be the show, you know.
Right.
It all was possible because I started, you know, not concentrating on the showmanship, but on the playing first. You know, once you master the playing, then you can start applying tricks and theatrics into it too.
Absolutely.
So I stress that on every new drummer that I meet. You know, like they're always like, I want to learn how to do all that stuff. I'm like, learn how to play first.
How do you work in some of the theatrics while not losing the beat? Like, maybe you could just give an example.
There's a couple different ones that I've kind of favorited over the years that I try not to do the same thing twice. One thing that I like to do with the hi-hat cymbal is do I call it the butter and the bread, this one. And that's cool for doing like quarter notes on the hi-hat, you know, where you're playing, you just kind of like. So you're just kind of like slicing through, flipping it up, and hitting it like that.
One thing I noticed, and I learned this from a Carmine Apiece drum clinic. He said at a clinic that he holds his stick
Just like this,
in
yeah.
there so he could twirl and play. And I see you doing that as well.
Yeah, in certain part, like a lot of people, when they see this kind of shit, you know, they're like, you know, how are you switching your finger back and forth? I just kind of hold it like that, and that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
And then as soon as people learn that, they're like, oh, I get it now, you know. And then I see drummers like Tommy Lee or like Morgan Rose that can like bounce the stick off the snare and throw it in the air. I can't do that, so I found a way to fake it, where you just kind of like hit and throw like this. So, oh, that's another one I use like.
The bounce is tricky. I went through
hard,
a phase for a couple of years. I was about 50-50 when I would do it. My drum tech even actually wrote like a little, in a Sharpie, a little like sweet spot. And about 50% of the time I could get it. The other 50% of the time it'd like come back and hit me in the nuts or whatever.
Yeah, that would, yeah. Can you do it right now, you think?
Oh, dude, I suck at it.
Should we try it? You want to try it? All right, let's try it. We're going to have Mike do it. There we go.
But here, so we're in rehearsals, and I'm constantly, hey, I got it. But in rehearsals, I was, rather than 50-50 like I am on stage, I was about 90-10, missing it.
Oh, no.
And one of the cello players got so pissed, he walked out of rehearsal, got really mad.
Yeah, that's
He
the
was
other
like,
thing.
Yeah, it started to really piss him off. Those guys are a little uptight to begin with, but they're not used to a drummer bouncing sticks into their zone. Here's the thing with stick throwing, too. Like, because I'll see a lot of people write online, oh, Portnoy kept throwing his sticks, he kept missing it or whatever. If I throw 10 sticks a night, if I catch 7 of them, if I was a baseball player,
night, yeah.
Baseball players only need to hit three hits out of 10 at-bats to bat 300, which is like a really good average. But yet, if we drummers were only to catch 3 out of 10 sticks, we'd be like a mockery. How come baseball players are allowed to have a 300 average, but drummers are expected to have like a 900 average?
Take that, haters. Well, I think definitely a stereotype that I've, you know, bonded with a lot of drummers over the years, that we're all just cavemen at heart. You know, it's very tribal, animalistic kind of, you know.
We hit things for a living.
We hit things for a living.
Totally.
So you kind of become that character. You kind of, you know, start to think like a caveman almost.
2 things about drummers that I've found. One is that they're all usually hyper. You know,
Well, you have to be. It's such a high energy
and,
job.
and
you know, it's
we're
very
using
physical.
all 4 limbs. You know, we're not just standing there.
I've seen both of us come up on stage like we just got out of a shower. We're just
Totally.
drenched in sweat. The rest of the band, they're just kind of like, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
Like my fingers are hurting, you know.
The other thing about drummers is that there's an awesome drum community. Like, I've done a lot of drum shows, drum festivals. If you got 30
Awesome.
guitar players together, they would like have their backs towards you. You know, oh no, you're not allowed to see. That's my riff. You know.
Yeah.
The drum community is like such an awesome community, and it's like you're like part of this club. You know?
It's really not common that you'll meet a drummer that's kind of like a, you know, crazy egotistical asshole, you know, like most of them are just really cool. It is a weird, you know, almost kind of cult-like mentality when you're a drummer, you know, you're just kind of in that lifestyle. Now, I heard that you're a little bit, you know, OCD about your setup. Do you like having everything in kind of a particular order?
I'm OCD about. I'm OCD with everything in my life. Like, everything at home has to be organized and meticulously set up, and you know,
I think that's a common drummer
alphabetical
stereotype.
and chronological and everything like that. But I'm not like that with the drums. It's the craziest thing. Most people think, because of what I did with Dream Theater for so long, most people think I'm like this tech guy and technical guy. I don't give a shit. Just set it up. If I'm doing some sort of performance thing, they'll like email me like they're really scared, like, oh, do you need the 14 by 16 maple shell? I was like, I don't give a shit.
Give me a drum to hit.
Just put a kick drum there. I don't care. And like, I was never even like the type of drummer that practices a lot. I was when I was younger, but honestly, I don't like practice now. I don't know anything about technique. I don't care less about how many double stroke quintuplet and flamadiddles you do. I don't know about that. I don't care about that. Music, drumming, it's just like, it's from here, not from here. I mean, if you can add some of that to this, then great, but this has to come first.
Those are wise words right there. Well, I can vouch for that because we did the tour with you guys in South America, and getting the same gear twice in South America is a crapshoot. You know, so every day you were pretty much on a different drum kit with a different setup. I mean, I guess that just comes from a lot of experience. If you can play on many different setups, then it doesn't really matter.
You have to be able to adapt. I mean,
Yes, adapting, yeah.
You know, you gotta go with the flow. You
Yeah.
gotta be able to be adaptable.
Well, I can relate to you there, because when we started out as a band, we did a lot of multi-band gigs. We had to share a lot of gear. Really, the drummer gets the short end of the stick with any kind of gig, because that's the only instrument that you can't use. You know, you can't use your own gear at every show if you're playing, you know, a gig with like 12 bands. So it was usually sharing a kit, and you know, you have like 5 minutes to change over. You got to just kind of like deal with what you got and just make it work. You know,
It's weird because most drummers start with that. Now I'm in like 14 bands, and like, so I have to adapt. I can't have my kit that does all these different gigs. You know, if I'm gonna play in all these different bands and I do a gig here one day and a gig there the next day, I gotta be able to adapt. I gotta be easygoing and flexible with what's provided. So I've actually learned later in my career to have to be a little bit more easygoing like that.
Do you have any advice for new drummers for just expanding their versatility?
It's
with their
what
styles?
we said earlier. It all comes down to this: kick, snare, hat. Make sure you have that.
If you can
and
master that,
everything else will follow. When the new Winery Dogs album, when we wrote those songs, we went to Richie's studio, and this is what we wrote those songs on. This was
Really?
at Richie's studio. All the writing of all those songs, kick, snare, hat, and there was a floor tom and a crash. But I mean, it was bare bones, and it's like, that's all you need.
that's all you need. Yeah.
So if you're,
Everything else is filler.
exactly. Everything else is just icing on the cake.
Yeah, exactly. So Ringo is, you know, no doubt one of the greatest. Oh, there he is right there.
My whole leg is Beatles.
He is definitely like one of the godfathers and one of the most well-known drummers. You know, his name, you know, just being a part of the Beatles, being one of the greatest bands of all time. Do you feel like Ringo doesn't get enough credit as a drummer?
Well, first of all, my favorite joke of all time, not a joke, my favorite quote of all time. Somebody once asked John Lennon, is Ringo Starr the best drummer in the world? And John said, Ringo's not even the best drummer in the Beatles.
I remember that.
Ringo is, you know, my first drum hero, but still to this day, one of my all-time biggest drum heroes.
I mean, I could say the same. I mean, my sister and I, we grew up watching like Hard Day's Night, Help. You know, Ringo, I was always drawn to Ringo because he always fascinated me because his instrument was so different than the other guys.
Nobody played drums like that at that point. In the early 60s, every drummer, you know, think about Elvis's band or Buddy Holly's band or Chuck Berry's band, the drummer was just some guy in the background just playing a straight beat. You know, the first couple of years he was just kind of like that, but then once the Beatles started to get really experimental around 65, 66, around Rubber Soul and Revolver, as they were advancing as musicians and songwriters, he was advancing as a creative element in the band. I mean,
Right, yeah.
you know, if you listen to like Lady Madonna, for instance, there's two drum parts. You know, one speaker you have in one speaker,
It's all stereoed
the
out,
other
yeah.
speaker you have you know, and
Yeah, yeah.
nobody was double tracking drums like that. You
Yeah,
know? He
I
was
mean,
the first one to do all that stuff. When I did my Beatles tribute band, I was able to really analyze what he played, and something like Penny Lane or whatever, it's just no even hi-hat or cymbals, just kick snare, pa, pa, boom, pa. That's genius.
He left so much space for
Totally.
everything. You
I
know?
would
He was
never
brilliant.
sit at the kit and in the studio and just go boom, ka, ka.
I don't think many drummers would, you know, they would want to fill in all those notes. He influenced so many drummers too. At the time that the Beatles came out, I mean, I wish I would have been alive at that time because it must have just been mind-blowing.
I was born the day that the Beatles finished Sgt. Pepper.
Wow, you look good, I must say.
And Sgt. Pepper came out 6 weeks later, and from day one, I was a Beatles fan. My dad was a rock and roll disc jockey. So he turned me
So
on to
cool.
all that stuff when I was a kid, and I remember when the White Album came out and when Abbey Road came out, I was a 1 or 2 year old kid like listening to all that stuff.
I'm so jealous. I feel like I missed all the good music of that generation.
It's
you know?
forever, man. It's still here, man.
Hey, music, yeah, you just gotta know where to find it, right?
His style was just like his legs always going. It's just it's
Elbows are
nonstop.
flaring, yeah.
Do this for 2 hours straight, man. You know, it's like, how?
So it's like.